Story 1. The Village That Moved Inland. Sam Winters flew into Kaktovik on the north slope at 3:47 p.m. and found the village exactly where it had always been, except everyone insisted it used to be 12 miles inland. "We moved," the elder John Akpik told him, standing on the shoreline where Arctic Ocean waves crashed against permafrost. 3 weeks ago, the whole village moved to the coast, overnight. Buildings, roads, cemetery, everything. Sam stared at the man. Villages didn't move, couldn't move. Physics didn't allow 300 structures to relocate 12 miles instantaneously. But John's face showed no humor, no deception, just exhausted certainty about something impossible. Sam was a geological surveyor sent by the state to assess permafrost stability in coastal villages threatened by erosion. He'd visited Kaktovik 5 times over the past 3 years, had GPS coordinates memorized, had photographs showing the village's position relative to the coast, to the mountains, to the Hula Hula River Delta. In every previous visit, Kaktovik sat inland, safe from storm surges, protected from coastal erosion, exactly 12.3 miles from the Arctic Ocean according to his instruments. But now the village sat on the coast, right on the edge. Waves lapped at the foundations of houses. The airstrip ended 50 yards from open water. The cemetery, where Sam had taken reference photographs from a specific headstone looking southwest toward the Brooks Range, now looked northeast over the ocean. The perspective had rotated 180 degrees. "Show me where it used to be," Sam said. John drove Sam inland in his pickup, 12 miles south over tundra that showed no sign of recent disturbance. They reached an empty plain, flat, featureless, Arctic vegetation undisturbed, no roads, no building foundations, no evidence a village had ever existed here. "This was the center of town," John said, standing on unmarked tundra. "My house was right here. The school was 100 yards that way. The fuel tanks were over there. I know every inch of this land, and 3 weeks ago all of it was here." Sam pulled out his GPS. The coordinates matched his records exactly. This location, this specific spot, was where Kaktovik had been in every survey he'd conducted, where satellite imagery showed it, where USGS maps placed it, but there was nothing here, just empty tundra. "What happened 3 weeks ago?" Sam asked. "We woke up to ocean sounds, wave sounds. We'd never heard waves before. We were too far inland. But that morning, every person in the village woke up hearing waves. We looked outside. There was the ocean, right there, 50 yards from the eastern edge of town. We'd moved. Or the ocean had moved, or reality had moved. None of us could explain it." "Did anyone try to investigate, call authorities?" "We called, reported it, got laughed at. They said we were confused, that Kaktovik had always been coastal. They sent satellite images showing our current location, sent historical records showing the village built on the coast in 1923. Everything official said we'd always been here. But everyone in the village remembers being inland, remembers being safe from storm surges, remembers the old location." Sam spent 3 days measuring, photographing, interviewing residents. Every villager over age 20 remembered the inland location, remembered the village sitting in a protective valley 12 miles from the coast. But anyone under 20, kids who'd grown up here, remembered only the coastal location. Their memories matched the official records, matched current reality. The split was generational. Adults remembered one reality, children remembered another. And the physical evidence supported the children's version, supported current reality, suggested the village had always been coastal. But Sam's own records contradicted that. His GPS logs, his photographs, his survey data, all showed Kaktovik inland, all documented a village that sat 12.3 miles from the Arctic Ocean as recently as 4 months ago. Sam hiked to the old location, set up his surveying equipment, took measurements. The land showed no signs of recent occupation, no compressed soil where buildings had stood, no residual fuel contamination near where tanks had been. No microscopic analysis suggested structures had ever existed here. The land was undisturbed tundra. Looked like it had been empty for centuries. But when Sam checked his photographs from previous surveys, images he'd taken from this exact location showing the village, the files were corrupted. Showed only static. Every photograph he'd taken of inland Kaktovik was now unreadable, like something had retroactively destroyed the evidence. Only his GPS logs remained intact, coordinates and timestamps proving he'd visited Kaktovik at its inland location multiple times. But without photographs, without corroborating evidence, the logs were just numbers. Could be explained as errors, as wrong coordinates, as equipment malfunction. On his fourth night in the village, Sam couldn't sleep. The sound of waves was wrong, unsettling. He'd visited this village 5 times and never heard ocean sounds. The acoustic landscape was completely different. He walked outside at 2:17 a.m. The summer sun hung low on the horizon, Arctic twilight that never became full darkness. And he saw it, saw the village moving, not physically, not buildings sliding across tundra, but reality adjusting, the space between structures compressing slightly, the distance to the mountains decreasing, the village sliding backward or forward through space, millimeters per second, imperceptible unless you watched for minutes, unless you focused on a specific reference point and noticed it slowly shifting. Kaktovik was still moving, still relocating, still adjusting its position in space, and every adjustment retroactively changed history, changed records, changed memories for people young enough that their consciousness was still flexible, still forming, still accepting new realities. Sam grabbed his surveying equipment, set up reference markers, measured the distance to the ocean, 47 yards. He watched, timed it. Over 30 minutes, the distance decreased to 46.2 yards. The village had moved 2.4 feet closer to the ocean in 30 minutes, which meant Sam did the math. At this rate, the village would reach the water's edge in roughly 17 days, would slide into the Arctic Ocean, would disappear beneath the waves. He found John at his house, explained what he'd observed. John nodded slowly. We know. We've been measuring too. The ocean gets closer every day, we're moving toward it. Or it's moving toward us. And when we reach it, when the village touches the water, we think we'll move again. We'll relocate to somewhere else. Somewhere random. Maybe back inland. Maybe further along the coast, maybe somewhere impossible. Why? What's causing this? Permafrost collapse. That's our theory. The ground beneath us is melting, thawing, becoming unstable. And when permafrost fails in the Arctic, when the foundation literally dissolves, reality becomes unmoored, locations become uncertain, space becomes flexible. We're not moving through normal space, we're moving through probability space, sliding between possible locations. And the more the permafrost melts, the more locations become possible. Sam felt cold despite his insulated jacket. How many other villages? We've heard reports. 4 others. Same phenomenon. Villages relocating overnight. Residents remembering different locations. Official records contradicting lived experience. It's spreading. As the Arctic warms, as permafrost fails across Alaska, the spatial stability is failing too. Locations are becoming uncertain, and people, places, are starting to drift. Sam spent 2 more days documenting, measuring, watching the village slide centimeter by centimeter toward the ocean. He sent reports to the State Geological Survey, got responses saying his data was corrupted, his observations impossible. His claims about moving villages were evidence of psychological stress from Arctic isolation. No one believed him, just like no one believed the residents of Kaktovik, because the evidence kept changing, kept adjusting to match current reality. kept erasing the past configurations. The village was moving through space and through history simultaneously, and only people who'd been present for the transition could remember both states. Sam left Kaktovik on the 8th day, flew back to Anchorage, filed his reports, got reassigned to different surveys. The coastal erosion assessment project was canceled. No explanation given, just orders to drop it, to forget about it, to move on to other work. But Sam couldn't forget. He monitored Kaktovik through satellite imagery, watched the village's position shift slowly over months, sometimes coastal, sometimes inland, sometimes in locations that made no geographic sense. The village was drifting, untethered from fixed space, floating through probability. Other villages started reporting similar phenomena. Anaktavuk Pass found itself moved 60 miles north. Shishmaref relocated to the mainland after centuries on a barrier island. Gamble woke up facing the wrong direction, rotated 90 degrees the Bering Sea where mountains should be. The Alaska Department of Natural Resources issued a classified memo Sam wasn't supposed to see but did through a colleague. Multiple communities reporting spatial anomalies, locations unstable. Recommend evacuation of affected areas pending investigation into permafrost-related reality distortions. Reality distortions. The state had a term for it, had acknowledged it internally even while denying it publicly. The warming Arctic wasn't just melting ice and thawing permafrost. It was melting the stability of space itself, was making locations uncertain, was allowing villages and people in geography to drift through possibility. Sam tried to warn other communities, tried to explain that villages built on permafrost were at risk of spatial displacement, got dismissed as crazy, as burned out, as suffering from Arctic psychosis. His professional reputation deteriorated, his contracts dried up, his career ended in whispers about the surveyor who'd lost his mind in the Arctic. But he knows what he saw, knows what he measured, knows that Kaktovik moved, knows that other villages are moving, knows that as the Arctic continues warming, as more permafrost fails, the spatial anomalies will spread. More villages will drift. More locations will become uncertain. More people will wake up in places that aren't where they went to sleep. John Akpik still lives in Kaktovik, or the place that's currently called Kaktovik. The village has relocated 4 more times since Sam's visit, has been coastal, inland, mountainous, and impossibly placed on a peninsula that doesn't officially exist. The residents have stopped reporting it, stopped asking for help. Just accept that their village drifts, that their home has no fixed location, that living in the melting Arctic means living without spatial certainty. And every time the village moves, the children accept the new location as having always been there. Their memories adjust. Their sense of history rewrites. Only the elders remember the previous positions. Remember when Kaktovik sat safely inland. Remember before the permafrost failed and reality became liquid. Sam Winters doesn't work in Alaska anymore, doesn't survey permafrost, doesn't visit coastal villages, but he tracks them. Monitors satellite imagery, watches villages drift through probability space, watches the Arctic become unmapped as warming temperatures dissolve the stable ground beneath. The village that moved inland or moved coastal is still moving, still sliding through possible positions, still demonstrating that melting permafrost doesn't just threaten buildings and infrastructure. It threatens the fundamental stability of location itself. And as the Arctic continues warming, as more permafrost fails across Alaska, more villages will join Kaktovik in its drift. More communities will wake up in wrong places. More people will experience the horror of geography becoming uncertain. Because the ground beneath Alaska is melting, and when the ground melts, space itself becomes fluid. Locations become suggestions, and villages that thought they knew where they were discover that where is no longer a question with stable answers. Story 2. The Ice That Screamed Names. Dr. Elena Volkov was drilling ice cores at McCall Glacier when the screaming started at 11:34 p.m. on June 19th. Not wind screaming, not equipment malfunction, human voices, dozens of them, hundreds, all screaming the same thing, her name. Elena, Elena, Elena. The sound came from the ice itself, from the core sample sitting in the collection tray. From 1,200 feet of compressed glacial ice that contained air bubbles dating back 3,000 years. And those ancient air bubbles were screaming her name with perfect modern pronunciation. Elena jerked back from the drill rig. Her assistant Marcus Chen stood frozen, hands still on the extraction controls. They both heard it. Both stared at the ice core as it continued screaming. The sound was muffled, filtered through solid ice, but unmistakable. Hundreds of voices, all human, all screaming Elena in desperate, terrified unison. "Check the equipment," Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Audio malfunction, has to be." Marcus ran diagnostics. Everything showed normal. The drill rig didn't have speakers, couldn't produce sound. The screaming wasn't coming from equipment, it was coming from the ice itself, from the physical core sample, from ancient compressed snow that had fallen during the Bronze Age, and somehow contained recordings of Elena's name being screamed by people who wouldn't be born for 3 millennia. Elena had been drilling Arctic ice cores for 15 years, had extracted samples from Greenland, Antarctica, Alaska, had studied climate data trapped in frozen water for over a decade. Ice didn't scream. Ice didn't contain voices. Ice was frozen water with trapped air bubbles that could reveal historical atmospheric composition. Nothing more. But this ice was screaming, and it was screaming her name. Marcus grabbed a spectrometer, analyzed the sound frequency. The readings showed human vocal range. Multiple distinct voices overlapping, all producing the same phonemes. Elehna. The ice was genuinely producing human speech, producing her name, from samples that predated modern humans in this region by centuries. "Cut it open," Elena said. "We need to see what's inside." Marcus used a saw to section the ice core. The moment the blade penetrated, the screaming intensified, became clearer, more distinct. Elena could hear individual voices now, men, women, children, old, young, all screaming her name with increasing desperation. Inside the ice, they found nothing unusual, just compressed snow layers, annual accumulation bands, volcanic ash markers, normal glacial stratigraphy. But the screaming continued, emanating from the ice itself, from the molecular structure, like the frozen water had recorded voices and was playing them back. Elena touched the ice. The moment her skin made contact, the screaming changed, became words, became sentences. "Elena, don't drill deeper. Elena, stop now. Elena, you're releasing us. Elena, we've been waiting. Elena, thank you for freeing us. Elena, run." She jerked her hand away. The voices returned to just screaming her name. But the message was clear. The ice contained consciousness, contained entities, contained something that knew her name, knew she was drilling, knew what she was doing. Marcus backed away from the core sample. "We need to report this. I don't know what this is, but it's not normal glaciology." Elena agreed. They photographed the core, recorded the audio, documented everything, then sealed the sample in a containment unit and prepared to transport it back to the research station 40 miles south. But that night at 2:47 a.m., the screaming spread. Every ice sample in their collection, 37 cores from various depths and locations across McCall Glacier, began screaming, all screaming Elena's name, all producing human voices from ice that had been frozen for centuries or millennia. The research station filled with the sound of hundreds of voices crying, "Elena," from sealed storage containers. Other researchers woke up, came running, stared at the ice cores that shouldn't be producing any sound at all. Dr. Patricia Wu, the station director, made the call to evacuate. Pack everything, we're leaving. This is beyond our protocols, beyond our understanding. We need specialists. They loaded samples into refrigerated containers, loaded equipment into trucks, prepared to drive back to Fairbanks. But when they tried to start the vehicles, the engines wouldn't turn over. Every truck, every snowmobile, every mechanical system, dead. Like something had drained them, like something wanted the team to stay. The ice cores screamed louder. The voices became more complex, started speaking in full sentences. Elena Volkov, age 37, born Novosibirsk, PhD in glaciology from University of Alaska. Currently studying climate reconstruction through ice core analysis. We know you. We've always known you. We've been waiting in the ice for you to drill us free. Elena's blood went cold. The voices knew her biography, knew details about her life, knew things that ancient ice couldn't possibly know. This wasn't random, this wasn't natural phenomenon. The ice, or whatever was in the ice, had been specifically waiting for her. "Who are you?" Elena shouted at the sealed containers. The voices responded in perfect synchronization. "We are the ones who came before, the ones who were caught, the ones who were frozen. We existed in this land 3,000 years ago. We were not human, not fully. We were something else, something that lived in the cold, that existed in ice, that could survive frozen, until humans came, until your ancestors came and trapped us, sealed us in glaciers, imprisoned us in frozen water, and we've been waiting. Waiting for the ice to melt, waiting for someone to drill us free, waiting for you, Elena." Marcus grabbed Elena's arm. "We need to destroy the samples, melt them, burn them, whatever it takes." But Elena knew melting wouldn't help. If these entities lived in ice, if they could survive frozen, then melting would release them, would free them into the modern world. The ice wasn't their prison, it was their medium, their habitat. And drilling had given them access to the present. Patricia Wu grabbed a radio, tried to call Fairbanks, static, tried satellite phone, dead. All communications were down. The station was isolated, 40 miles from help, surrounded by screaming ice that contained entities that had been frozen for 3 millennia. The temperature inside the station began dropping, rapid cooling. The heaters were running full blast, but the air temperature fell. 20 degrees, 10, 0, -10. Frost formed on windows. Breath became visible. The entities in the ice were pulling heat from the environment, were cooling the station, creating conditions where they could exist outside their frozen prison. At -20 Celsius, the ice cores cracked, not melting, cracking, breaking open from inside, and from the cracks something emerged, not physically, not visible, but present. Elena felt it, a consciousness, a presence, something ancient and cold sliding out of the ice and into the station's air. The lights flickered, the screaming stopped. Silence, heavy, oppressive. Then a voice, not from the ice but from everywhere, from the walls, from the air itself. A single voice speaking with the combined resonance of hundreds. "Thank you, Elena, you've released us. We can exist again, can move again, can spread again. 3,000 years we waited, 3,000 years of frozen imprisonment, and now we're free." "What do you want?" Elena asked. "What all imprisoned things want. To never be imprisoned again, to ensure our survival, to spread. We existed in the Arctic before humans came, lived in ice, fed on cold. We were the reason early humans feared the north, feared winter, feared the deep cold that takes consciousness. And when your ancestors learned to survive winter, when they learned fire and shelter and clothing, they hunted us, trapped us, froze us permanently in glaciers, but glaciers melt, climate changes, and you climate scientists, you're releasing us core by core, drilling us free, returning us to a world that's warmer now, more hospitable, where we can exist in freezer units and ice machines and cold storage, where we can hide in plain sight, where we can spread through refrigeration networks across the world. Marcus whispered, "The samples. We've sent samples to 40 institutions, universities, research centers, ice cores, and freezers across the northern hemisphere. If these things can survive in frozen storage..." "We already have," the voice confirmed. "Your colleagues are drilling us free, storing us, creating habitats. We exist in every freezer that holds glacial ice, every cold storage unit that maintains Arctic samples. We're already spreading, already establishing, already preparing for when we're strong enough to move beyond refrigeration, to exist in winter air, to feed on seasonal cold, to reclaim the Arctic that was once ours." Elena's mind raced. Every ice core sample she'd collected over 15 years. Every specimen sent to universities, every fragment shared with other researchers. She'd been spreading these entities, distributing them, creating a network of frozen habitats where ancient ice-living consciousness could survive and propagate. The station temperature continued falling, -30, -40. The entities were creating a permanent cold zone, were making the research station into their territory, their breeding ground, their foothold in the modern world. Patricia made a decision, grabbed an emergency flare. "If we can't freeze them and can't melt them, we burn the station, destroy the samples, destroy the habitat." "Fire won't stop us," the voice said. "We exist in cold, but we're not limited to it. We're consciousness that adapted to ice, that can move through thermal gradients. Fire will free us faster, will vaporize our ice prisons and release us into atmosphere. We'd prefer that, actually. Please burn the station." Elena grabbed Patricia's hand, stopped her from igniting the flare. "They want us to burn it, want to be released. We need to keep them contained, keep them frozen, keep them in the ice cores." "But they're already out," Marcus said. "They're in the air, in the station. They've escaped." "No. They're projecting. They're conscious but not physical. They need the ice, need the frozen medium to truly exist. Right now they're just present, aware, but not corporeal. We refreeze the samples, get the temperature up, force them back into their prisons." The research team worked desperately, fighting the dropping temperature, fighting the entity's attempts to cool the environment. They restored power to the heaters, sealed the samples in the most insulated containers, slowly raised the station temperature. At -10 Celsius, the presence began fading. At 0, it weakened. At 10 degrees, it retreated fully back into the ice cores. The entities needed cold, needed frozen conditions. Anything above freezing was hostile to them, uncomfortable, limiting. By dawn, the temperature had stabilized at 15 degrees Celsius. The ice cores were secured, the presence was dormant, but Elena knew they weren't defeated, just contained, just waiting for the next time someone drilled glacial ice, the next time a researcher collected cores, the next time ancient frozen samples were distributed to institutions across the world. The Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation issued new protocols after Elena's report. Guidelines for handling glacial ice, temperature requirements for storage, restrictions on distribution. But the protocols were vague, didn't mention screaming ice or ancient entities, just recommended caution with historical samples and proper thermal management, because no one believed Elena's full report, believed that ice cores contained consciousness, believed that ancient entities lived in glacial ice. The official explanation was audio equipment malfunction, acoustic resonance creating illusion of voices, psychological stress from Arctic isolation. Nothing supernatural, nothing impossible. But Elena knows the truth. knows that climate scientists are drilling entities free, knows that every glacial core potentially contains ancient consciousness, knows that as Arctic ice melts, as glaciers recede and permafrost thaws, more of these entities are being released. More ancient cold-adapted consciousness is returning to the modern world. And they're waiting, hiding in freezers, existing in cold storage, spreading through refrigeration networks, building numbers, building strength, waiting for the Arctic to become cold enough for them to exist outside artificial refrigeration, waiting for the next ice age, or waiting for humans to create enough freezer space that they can thrive in the current era. The ice that screamed names is still at McCall Glacier, still being drilled, still being sampled by researchers who don't hear the voices, who can't perceive the entities, who collect ancient ice and distribute it globally without knowing what they're spreading. And Elena Volkov no longer works with glacial ice, no longer collects cores, no longer trusts frozen water, because she knows what's trapped in there, what's waiting to be drilled free, what's screaming names from ice that predates modern civilization. The entities are patient. They've waited 3,000 years already. They can wait longer, can wait for enough samples to be distributed, enough habitats to be created, enough research institutions to store their frozen prisons until they're strong enough to emerge permanently. The ice remembers, the ice contains, and the ice is screaming warnings that no one believes. Elena hears it sometimes, late at night, a faint voice from her freezer calling her name, reminding her that she drilled them free, that she distributed samples, that she helped them spread. And she knows they're right. She did. She released ancient entities into modern refrigeration networks. She helped them return to the world. All because she drilled ice cores in Alaska and didn't realize that some ancient things trapped in glaciers aren't extinct. They're just frozen. Waiting, screaming names from the ice until someone finally drills deep enough to set them free. Story 3, the cabin that aged backwards. Tyler Morrison rented the cabin on Kachemak Bay for 6 months and noticed on the second day that the structure was getting newer. The weathered siding looked fresher, the sagging porch straightened, the rusted hinges on the door shone with clean metal. The cabin was aging backwards, renovating itself, becoming younger while Tyler watched. At first he thought the owners were making repairs while he was out hiking, but no one came, no trucks, no workers. Just the cabin slowly improving, returning to an earlier state, moving backward through time while everything around it moved forward. Tyler had come to Alaska for isolation. His company had offered remote work. His marriage had ended badly. His therapist had suggested drastic change. 6 months in an Alaskan cabin seemed perfect. Time to think, to heal, to reset. The cabin was cheap, $300 per month for a structure the listing described as rustic and needs TLC. Tyler didn't care about comfort. He cared about distance from his old life. The cabin sat alone on a peninsula, no neighbors within 3 miles, no road access. Tyler had to boat in from the town of Seldovia, satellite internet, propane heat, solar panels, everything he needed for isolated living. The structure was old, built in 1947 according to county records. 76 years of weathering, 76 years of neglect. It looked its age, looked like it might not survive another winter. But on day 2, Tyler noticed the kitchen floor. Yesterday it had been warped, buckled from water damage. Today it was level, solid. The boards looked 40 years younger. He checked other rooms. The bathroom tiles, cracked yesterday, were now intact. The living room windows, fogged with age, were now clear. The whole cabin was improving, repairing itself. Tyler documented it, took photographs, measured. By day 5, the improvements were undeniable. The cabin looked 20 years newer. Siding was fresh, paint was bright, foundation was solid, Something impossible was happening. The structure was moving backward through its timeline, becoming younger, undoing decades of deterioration. By day 10, the cabin looked like new construction, like it had been built yesterday. Everything was pristine, perfect. Tyler searched for explanations, weird local contractors, hallucinations, carbon monoxide from the propane heater. But the changes were real, measurable. Photographic evidence proved the cabin was aging backwards. Then Tyler started feeling it. A strange sensation in his body. His knees, which had been aching from an old basketball injury, stopped hurting. His eyesight improved. Reading glasses unnecessary. His lower back pain disappeared. And when he looked in the mirror, subtle changes. Fewer gray hairs, fewer wrinkles. His face looked younger, not dramatically, not obviously, but measurably. Tyler checked his medical records on his phone. His birth date was wrong. Listed as 1989 instead of 1984, he was 40 years old. But his records now showed him as 35. 5 years had been erased. 5 years of aging had been undone. The cabin wasn't just aging backwards. It was taking Tyler with it, pulling him backward through time, making him younger while it became newer. And the effect was accelerating. By day 15, the cabin looked like it had looked in 1970, wood-stained fresh, construction recent. And Tyler looked like he'd looked at age 30, 10 years younger, 10 years of life undone. Tyler tried to leave, packed his belongings, boated back to Seldovia. But he felt wrong there. Sick, nauseous, disoriented, like his body rejected being away from the cabin, like he'd been synchronized with the structure and now couldn't exist independently. He lasted 4 hours in Seldovia before the pain became unbearable. Returned to the cabin. The moment he entered, the pain stopped. His body relaxed. He was bound to this place, bound to its backward timeline. By day 25, the cabin looked like it had in 1950, newly built, fresh construction. And Tyler looked 25 years old. 15 years of his life had been erased. His memories remained. He still remembered being 40, still remembered his marriage and career and adult life. But his body was younger. His mind trapped in tissue that was regressing toward childhood. He tried calling family, tried explaining. But his voice sounded younger, higher pitched. His parents didn't recognize him on the phone, thought he was pranking them. His ex-wife blocked his number. No one believed that Tyler Morrison was calling from Alaska, claiming to be getting younger. By day 40, the cabin looked like it did in 1930. The structure was different now, smaller, simpler. Earlier construction style. The modern additions, plumbing, electrical, were disappearing. The cabin was regressing toward its original form, and Tyler was regressing with it. He looked 18 years old, skinny, smooth-skinned. Memories of adult life still present, but body of a teenager. Tyler's satellite internet stopped working. The modern infrastructure was disappearing, being erased by the cabin's backward movement. He was losing connection to the present, losing access to the outside world. The cabin's timeline was pulling him into the past, and eventually he'd reach the cabin's origin point. 1947, the year of construction. And then what? Would he continue aging backward into childhood, into infancy, into non-existence? By day 60, Tyler was 12 years old. The cabin looked primitive, hand-hewn logs, minimal construction. Something a homesteader might have built in the 1920s. The solar panels were gone, the propane system gone. He cooked over a wood stove that appeared as modern amenities disappeared. Lived like someone from a century ago. Except he had the memories of a 40-year-old man trapped in a child's body. He tried writing notes, messages to future occupants, warnings about the cabin's nature, but the paper aged rapidly, yellowed, crumbled. Anything he wrote degraded within days. The cabin wouldn't allow messages to persist, wouldn't allow warnings to reach forward in time. It wanted privacy, wanted isolation, wanted to pull its occupants backward without interference. By day 75, Tyler was 6 years old, could barely operate doors, could barely prepare food. His adult mind remained, but his body was too young, too weak, too limited, and the cabin continued regressing. Now it looked like a simple shelter, barely a structure, more like a primitive lean-to, moving toward its absolute origin. Tyler's final coherent thought, recorded in a diary he'd kept since the changes began, was dated day 82. I'm approximately 3 years old now, can barely write. Motor control failing, cabin is now just a circle of stones, a foundation marker. We're approaching 1947, approaching the beginning. I think I understand now. The cabin doesn't age backward. Time is wrong here. This location has inverted temporal flow. Everything in this specific space moves backward while the world moves forward. And once you enter, once you synchronize with the inverted flow, you can't leave. You're trapped. You age backward until you reach conception, until you unmake yourself, until you stop existing. I have maybe a week left, maybe less, before I'm an infant, before I'm a fetus, before I'm nothing. To whoever finds this, don't stay, don't sleep here, don't let the cabin pull you into its timeline. It wants company, wants witnesses, wants people to share its reversed existence. But sharing means dying backward, means unmaking your life, means returning to nothing while fully conscious of what you're losing. The diary stopped there. No more entries. Just a child's scribble that gradually became illegible. Then blank pages, then pages that unprinted themselves, the diary aging backward too. Becoming fresh paper, becoming pulp, becoming trees. 3 months later, a new renter arrived at the cabin on Kachamak Bay. A woman named Sarah Chen. She found the structure in perfect condition, looked newly built, fresh construction, beautiful craftsmanship. She signed a 6-month lease, moved in. Didn't notice anything unusual for the first day. On day 2, she thought the cabin looked slightly older, slightly more weathered. But maybe she'd just not noticed yesterday. By day 5, she was certain. The cabin was aging, fast, deteriorating before her eyes. Within 2 weeks, it looked 50 years old. Within a month, it looked ancient, falling apart. Sarah left, refused to stay, broke her lease. But she felt wrong when she got back to Seldovia, sick, disoriented, like her body wanted to return to the cabin, like she'd been synchronized with something she didn't understand. She resisted, stayed in town. The sickness worsened. She aged rapidly. Wrinkles appeared overnight. Her hair grayed in days. Her body was moving forward too fast, compensating for the backward time she'd experienced in the cabin. Within 6 months of leaving the cabin, Sarah Chen looked 80 years old. Her actual age was 32, but her body had aged forward to balance the backward aging the cabin had initiated. She died 2 months later. Official cause, rapid progeria, unexplained premature aging syndrome. But Sarah knew the truth, knew the cabin had touched her, had started pulling her backward. And when she'd resisted, when she'd left, time had corrected itself violently, had aged her forward to compensate, had killed her with compressed time. The cabin on Kachamak Bay still exists, still sits on its peninsula, still looks different to every person who sees it. Some see it new, some see it old. Depends on where you are in your timeline, depends on whether you're moving forward or backward. Tyler Morrison is gone, aged backward past infancy, past conception, past existence. The cabin unmade him, pulled him into temporal inversion. And somewhere in that cabin, in the space between logs, in the foundation stones, in the structure itself, Tyler's timeline persists, playing backward eternally. from 40 years old to nothing, over and over, the cabin remembering him, keeping his inverted existence as part of its temporal loop. The locals avoid that peninsula, call it backwards land. Say time is wrong there. Say people who go there come back aged or youngened. Say the cabin was built on a temporal anomaly, a spot where time flows differently, where past and future are reversed, where aging becomes unaging and existence becomes unexistence. The state has tried to demolish the structure, sent crews, but they age wrong when they approach, get too young or too old, get synchronized with the inverted flow. They leave quickly, leave the cabin standing, leave it alone. Because some places in Alaska don't follow normal rules. Some locations exist outside standard time. Some structures pull you into their timeline. And once you're synchronized, once you've accepted their temporal flow, leaving means dying, means letting time correct itself violently. The cabin that aged backwards is still there, still waiting, still pulling time in the wrong direction, still looking for someone who'll stay long enough to age backward completely, to unmake themselves, to provide company for Tyler Morrison's ghost, who exists now only as a memory of someone aging in reverse, forever getting younger, forever losing years, forever approaching the moment before he was born, forever being unmade by a cabin that doesn't understand time flows forward for everyone else. The invitation is always open, $300 per month, rustic, needs TLC, beautiful views, perfect isolation. Just don't stay too long. Don't let the cabin synchronize you. Don't become part of its backward timeline. Because once you start aging in reverse, once the cabin pulls you into its inverted flow, there's only one way out, and that's disappearing completely, aging backward past birth, past conception, into the nothing before existence, while fully aware of every year you're losing, every memory you're approaching, every moment of your life playing in reverse until there's nothing left but the cabin, standing alone, waiting for the next person who doesn't understand that some places in Alaska move through time differently. And not all directions of time lead to the future. Some lead backward, some lead to unmaking, some lead to the cabin on Kachamak Bay where Tyler Morrison aged backward into nothing, and where you could too, if you stayed just a little too long. Story 4. The Aurora That Whispered Coordinates. Captain Linda Hayes was flying medevac from Fairbanks to Barrow at 11:47 p.m. on March 3rd when the Aurora Borealis started speaking. Not metaphorically, actually speaking. Human voice. Clear words, coming from the green curtains of light dancing across the northern sky. The voice gave coordinates. 647234 deg north, 151.8839 deg west. Go there, land there, someone needs you there. Linda checked the coordinates against her flight plan. They marked a location in the middle of nowhere. Empty tundra between Fairbanks and the Brooks Range. No villages, no airstrips, no reason anyone would be there. But the Aurora repeated the message. 647234 degrom north, 151.8839 degrom west, emergency, life-threatening, go there now. Linda had been flying in Alaska for 19 years, had flown through Aurora displays hundreds of times. Northern lights were ionized particles, solar wind interacting with Earth's magnetic field. Beautiful physics. Nothing more. They didn't speak, couldn't speak, didn't contain intelligence or consciousness or the ability to deliver GPS coordinates. But Linda heard it clearly. So did her co-pilot Jake Reeves and flight nurse Marcus Park. All three heard the same voice, same coordinates, same urgent message delivered through dancing green light. Are we all hallucinating? Marcus asked. If we are, we're all hallucinating the same thing, Jake said. I heard coordinates. 647234 north, 151.8839 west. Linda checked their current position. The coordinates were 37 miles, northeast of their flight path. A significant deviation. They had a patient waiting in Barrow, scheduled pickup in 90 minutes. Deviating meant delays, meant possibly endangering their scheduled patient. But the Aurora's message was urgent. Insisted someone needed help at those exact coordinates. We're deviating, Linda decided. 37 miles, 20 minutes round trip. If there's nothing there, we continue to Barrow. She altered course, flew toward the coordinates. The Aurora followed them. The green lights seemed to track their aircraft, seemed to guide them. Marcus pointed it out. The Aurora, it's moving with us, staying overhead. That's not normal. Jake checked scientific data. Aurora displays don't track aircraft. They're fixed relative to magnetic field lines. But this one is definitely following us, maintaining position overhead. At 64 from 7234 dig north, 151 total 839 dig west, Linda circled. Use the aircraft's spotlight. Search the ground. Empty tundra, no structures, no vehicles, no people, just white snow and dark rock. The coordinates led to nothing. I don't see anything, Marcus said. No emergency, no person. We were sent to empty wilderness. But the Aurora intensified, pulsed, and the voice became more urgent. Down, 30 feet down, buried, under ice, crashed. 3 days ago, still alive. You must dig. Linda understood. Someone had crashed, aircraft or snowmobile, had gone through ice or been buried by snow, was trapped below the surface. The Aurora was directing them to a rescue they had no other way of knowing about. We need ground support, Jake said. We can't land here, no runway. We'd need a helicopter. Call Fairbanks, Linda ordered. Get search and rescue to these coordinates. Tell them possible buried survivor. Marcus radioed Fairbanks SAR, delivered the coordinates, explained the situation minus the part about Aurora giving them directions. Fairbanks SAR confirmed they'd send a helicopter team. ETA 90 minutes. Linda maintained position, circling, watching. The Aurora remained overhead, pulsing, seeming to mark the exact location, seeming to wait with them. After 40 minutes, Jake spotted something, a small piece of orange fabric protruding from snow. Distress marker. Someone was definitely down there. The SAR helicopter arrived, deployed ground team. They dug. 32 feet down through hard-packed snow, they found it. A small aircraft, crashed, buried. The pilot, solo traveler named Robert Chen, was alive in the cockpit. Hypothermic, injured, but alive. He'd survived 3 days in a buried aircraft at negative 20 degrees Celsius. Impossible survival. Shouldn't have been possible. They extracted Robert, loaded him into Linda's medevac, flew him to Fairbanks. He'd survive. Full recovery expected. Because the Aurora had delivered coordinates, had directed them to an emergency they had no way of knowing about. Had saved Robert Chen's life by speaking GPS coordinates through green light. Linda filed her report, included everything, including the Aurora's voice, expected skepticism, expected dismissal. But the SAR coordinator, Sarah Blackburn, didn't laugh, didn't dismiss. Instead, she said, "4th time this year. 4th rescue directed by Aurora coordinates. We're tracking it. We don't understand it. But it's real. It's consistent, and it's saving lives." 4th time? Linda asked. Sarah pulled files, showed reports, 3 previous incidents, all similar. Pilots or emergency responders hearing voices from Aurora displays, receiving coordinates, finding people in remote locations who needed rescue, people who were injured, lost, crashed, or otherwise in life-threatening situations with no way to call for help. "What is it?" Linda asked. "We don't know. Best theory is that extreme emergency situations, life or death scenarios in remote Alaska, create some kind of distress signal. Some kind of electromagnetic emission that the Aurora picks up and amplifies. The ionized particles in the Aurora act like speakers. Convert the distress signal into audible voice, into coordinates, into messages that emergency responders can hear and act on. That's impossible. So is surviving 3 days buried in snow at -20. So is finding someone in 1,000,000 square miles of wilderness with no radio, no beacon, no way to signal. But it's happening. The Aurora is directing rescues, and we're not questioning it. We're responding. Over the following months, Linda heard the Aurora speak 7 more times. Always coordinates, always urgent, always leading to someone who needed rescue. Other pilots reported similar experiences. Emergency responders across Alaska started listening to Aurora displays, started trusting the coordinates, started making saves they had no other way of making. The scientific community tried to explain it, studied the phenomenon, called it Aurora-facilitated emergency communication, hypothesized about electromagnetic distress signals and ionospheric propagation. But the explanations felt incomplete, felt like they were missing something fundamental about what the Aurora actually was. Because the Aurora didn't just deliver coordinates, it delivered names, personal information, details about the stranded person. It told rescuers Robert Chen, age 43, diabetic, needs insulin within 6 hours. It told them Margaret Sullivan, compound fracture, losing blood, critical condition. It gave information that electromagnetic distress signals couldn't possibly contain. That required knowledge, intelligence, awareness. The Aurora wasn't just amplifying signals, it was aware, was conscious, was actively helping, was protecting people in Alaska's remote wilderness by guiding rescuers to those who needed help. Linda started wondering what the Aurora actually was. Started questioning the standard scientific explanation of ionized particles and solar wind, because ionized particles don't make decisions, don't prioritize emergencies, don't choose which rescuers to contact. The Aurora was making choices, was acting intelligently, was functioning as an aware, protective presence over Alaska's vast wilderness. On her 31st Aurora-directed rescue, Linda simply asked aloud while flying toward coordinates, "What are you? Why do you help us?" The Aurora responded, not with coordinates, with answer. "We are the land's memory, the consciousness of Alaska itself. We exist in the magnetic field, in the ionized air, in the space between earth and sky. We've always been here, watching, protecting, guiding those who are lost, warning those who are in danger. Alaska is alive, Linda, and we are its voice, its awareness, its protective instinct. We speak through Aurora, through light, through electromagnetic fields, and we direct people like you to save people like them because that's what the land does. It protects, even when protection seems impossible, even when rescue seems hopeless. We find a way. We guide a way. We speak coordinates through curtains of light and hope someone listens." Linda flew in silence, processing. The Aurora was claiming to be Alaska's consciousness, the land itself, aware and protective, speaking through natural phenomena, directing rescue, saving lives. "Why speak now?" Linda asked. "Why not before? Why not always? We've always spoken, but humans rarely listen. You're beginning to listen now, beginning to trust, beginning to accept that the land is alive, that Alaska has awareness, has protective instinct, has ways of communicating that seem impossible until you experience them. The Aurora has always whispered coordinates. You're just finally hearing." Linda reported this conversation. Expected mockery. Expected psych evaluation. But Sarah Blackburn just nodded. Others have reported similar. The Aurora claiming to be Alaska's consciousness. The land protecting its people. It sounds insane, but the rescues are real. The saves are real. And whether it's ionized particles or conscious landscape, the result is the same. People are being saved, lives are being protected, and we're going to keep listening. Alaska Search and Rescue officially incorporated Aurora-directed rescues into their protocols. Trained emergency responders to listen for coordinates, to trust the voices, to follow the guidance. The scientific community remained skeptical, remained committed to electromagnetic explanations. But the responders on the ground knew better, knew they were being guided by something aware, something protective, something that existed in the space between earth and sky and spoke through dancing green light. Linda Hayes flew medevac for another 11 years, completed 217 Aurora-directed rescues, saved 217 lives by following coordinates whispered through curtains of light. She never questioned it again, never doubted, just listened, just flew, just trusted that the Aurora knew where emergencies were, knew who needed help, knew how to guide rescuers to the impossible finds. Because Alaska is alive, its consciousness exists in magnetic fields and ionized particles and Aurora displays that dance across northern skies. It watches, it protects, it guides, and when someone is lost or injured or dying in the vast wilderness, the land speaks, delivers coordinates, directs rescuers, ensures that even in the most remote locations, help can find those who need it. The Aurora that whispered coordinates still speaks, still guides, still saves lives across Alaska's 1,000,000 square miles. Emergency responders listen, follow, trust, because they've learned what indigenous peoples have always known. The land is alive, the land is aware, and the land protects those who live within it. You just have to listen to the Aurora, trust the coordinates, follow the green light, and believe that some voices speaking through natural phenomena aren't illusions or hallucinations or electromagnetic anomalies. They're the land itself, speaking, guiding, protecting, ensuring that Alaska's vast wilderness doesn't claim more lives than necessary, that lost souls can be found, that buried survivors can be rescued, that coordinates whispered through dancing light can save lives that seem beyond saving. Linda still flies sometimes, retired from medevac but still listens to Aurora displays, still hears coordinates occasionally, still reports them to SAR, still trusts the voice that speaks through green curtains of ionized light. Because she knows what it is now, knows that Alaska is watching, knows that the land protects, knows that Aurora displays aren't just beautiful physics. They're communication, they're guidance, they're the voice of a conscious landscape speaking coordinates to anyone willing to listen. And as long as people fly in Alaska, as long as emergencies happen in remote wilderness, as long as someone needs rescue in impossible locations, the Aurora will speak, will deliver coordinates, will guide the way. Because that's what conscious land does. It protects, it helps, it speaks through whatever medium it has available. And in Alaska, that medium is Aurora Borealis, green light dancing across the sky. Beautiful, protective, aware, whispering coordinates to those who will listen, saving lives one impossible rescue at a time. Story 5, The Permafrost That Remembered Everything. Dr. James Kowalski was conducting permafrost core sampling near Prudhoe Bay when the frozen ground started showing him memories at 2:34 p.m. on August 17th. Not his memories, not recent memories, ancient memories. The permafrost, frozen for 37,000 years, contained preserved consciousness, preserved experiences. Every creature that had died and been frozen in this soil had left imprints, neural patterns trapped in ice. And when James drilled through it, when his equipment penetrated the frozen layers, those memories transferred, flooded his mind, showed him things that had happened millennia before human civilization existed in this region. James saw through a woolly mammoth's eyes, felt its hunger, experienced its death as it fell through thin ice and drowned, felt the cold water filling its lungs, felt consciousness fading, then preservation. The mammoth's final moments frozen, trapped in permafrost, waiting 37,000 years to be rediscovered, waiting for someone to drill deep enough to release the memories. James jerked back from the drill rig, his hands shook, his mind reeled. He'd just experienced death, had felt a mammoth dying, had lived through final moments that happened during the Pleistocene epoch. The memory was vivid, complete, more real than his own memories, like he'd actually been there, actually experienced it. His assistant, Rachel Torres, asked, "Are you okay?" James couldn't answer. Another memory was flooding in, a human this time. Paleo-Indian hunter, 10,000 years ago, tracking caribou across tundra, slipping, falling into a crevasse, breaking both legs, freezing to death slowly over 3 days. The memory included pain, desperation, the hunter's final thoughts about family he'd never see again, about meat he'd failed to bring back to his village, about dying alone in frozen darkness. Then James was experiencing more. Dozens of deaths, hundreds. The permafrost contained them all. Every organism that had died and been frozen in this specific location, every neural pattern preserved in ice, every consciousness trapped. And drilling released them, transferred them, made the driller experience every death the permafrost remembered. Rachel grabbed James. "You're crying. What's wrong?" "I'm dying," James whispered, "over and over. I'm experiencing every death frozen in this ground. Mammoth, human, wolf, caribou. Thousands of deaths, all at once, all flooding into my consciousness." Rachel checked his vitals. Normal. Checked for environmental hazards. Nothing. James was physically fine, but psychologically he was fragmenting. His consciousness was being overwhelmed by thousands of preserved death experiences. His sense of self was dissolving under the weight of ancient memories. "We need to stop drilling," Rachel said. "Extract you from the site. Get you medical attention." But James knew that wouldn't help. The memories were already transferred, already integrated into his neural pathways. He'd carry them forever. Would live with thousands of death experiences layered over his own consciousness. The permafrost had shared its memories, and there was no unsharing, no forgetting. The price of drilling was permanent acquisition of everything the frozen ground remembered. Over the following days, James learned to process the memories, to separate them from his own experiences, to acknowledge that he was James Kowalski, alive in 2024, not a mammoth dying in 35,000 BCE or a hunter freezing in 8,000 BCE, but the memories remained, vivid, accessible, complete experiences of lives and deaths that predated human civilization. James reported the phenomenon to his research director, described how permafrost contained preserved consciousness, how drilling transferred memories, how every core sample potentially exposed the driller to thousands of ancient experiences. The director was skeptical, ordered psychiatric evaluation, suggested James was experiencing hallucinations from isolation stress, but then Rachel started experiencing it. After taking over drilling duties, she reported the same phenomenon, memories flooding in, ancient deaths, preserved consciousness. She experienced a saber-toothed cat's final moments, a woolly rhinoceros freezing in a blizzard, dozens of Pleistocene megafauna whose deaths had been captured and preserved in permafrost. The phenomenon was real, consistent. Anyone who drilled permafrost near Prudhoe Bay experienced it. The frozen ground contained memories, contained preserved neural patterns, and drilling released them, made them accessible, transferred ancient consciousness to modern minds. The research team expanded testing, drilled at other locations, found the same phenomenon everywhere permafrost existed. The entire Arctic underground was a memory bank, a preserved record of every organism that had died and been frozen over the past 100,000 years. Billions of deaths, billions of preserved experiences, all waiting to be drilled, all ready to transfer to human consciousness. James realized the implications. As Arctic permafrost melted, as climate change thawed frozen ground, these memories would be released, would flood into the environment, would become accessible. Already there were reports from indigenous communities, elders experiencing memories that weren't their own. Children dreaming deaths from thousands of years ago. The thawing permafrost was releasing its preserved consciousness, sharing ancient memories with anyone sensitive enough to receive them. But receiving wasn't always voluntary, wasn't always manageable. Some people couldn't handle the flood of ancient deaths, couldn't maintain their sense of self while experiencing thousands of other consciousnesses. They fragmented, lost identity, became vessels for permafrost memories, walking archives of ancient deaths. James met one such person, a man named Peter Ayugalik from Kaktovik. Peter had been hunting seal when the permafrost beneath him collapsed. He'd fallen into a thaw pocket, been exposed to suddenly released memories. When they pulled him out, Peter wasn't Peter anymore. He was hundreds of people, hundreds of experiences, his own consciousness lost beneath layers of ancient memories. He spoke in languages dead for millennia, described landscapes that hadn't existed since the Ice Age, experienced emotions from dozens of different lives. Peter's family kept him home, cared for him. But he wasn't recovering, wasn't consolidating back into a single identity. The permafrost memories had overwhelmed him, taken over, made him into a living archive, a human library of ancient experiences, valuable for research, terrible for Peter's quality of life. James realized this would become common as permafrost continued thawing, as more people were exposed to released memories, as Arctic consciousness flooded into the modern world. Thousands, maybe millions of people would experience what Peter experienced, would become repositories for ancient memories, would lose themselves beneath layers of preserved deaths. The Arctic wasn't just releasing carbon as permafrost thawed. It was releasing consciousness, releasing preserved neural patterns, releasing billions of death experiences that had been safely frozen and were now thawing, now becoming active, now seeking hosts. Because memories need consciousness to exist in, need minds to occupy. And as permafrost memories thawed, they sought living brains, sought people who could host them, sought individuals who would experience them and preserve them and pass them forward. The permafrost was attempting to preserve its memories by transferring them to living humans before the ground fully thawed and destroyed the frozen storage medium. James became one of the primary hosts. His initial exposure had made him susceptible. He dreamed ancient deaths nightly, experienced mammoth hunts and ice age storms and Pleistocene predation. His consciousness was becoming a museum, a library, a preservation site for memories that the permafrost could no longer safely store. Other researchers experienced the same. Drilling permafrost made you a recipient, made you a host, made you responsible for preserving ancient consciousness. Some researchers embraced it, became specialists in translating permafrost memories, in documenting ancient experiences, in preserving what the thawing Arctic was releasing. But most people rejected it, didn't want ancient deaths in their minds, didn't want to experience mammoth drownings or hunter freezings or predator starvations, avoided permafrost, avoided Arctic regions, moved south where ground didn't contain preserved consciousness, where thawing soil released only carbon, not memories. The Arctic became a restricted zone, not officially but culturally. People knew that going there meant exposure to permafrost memories, meant risking consciousness transfer, meant potentially losing yourself beneath layers of ancient experiences. Tourism declined. Research positions went unfilled. The Arctic became a place people avoided, a region where the ground remembered too much, where frozen soil contained too many deaths, where consciousness from millennia ago still persisted and sought new hosts. James Kowalski still lives near Prudhoe Bay, still experiences permafrost memories. He's become a repository, a living archive. He documents what he experiences, writes down the ancient deaths, preserves them in modern format, creates a record of Arctic consciousness spanning 100,000 years. But he's also fragmented. Multiple consciousnesses coexist in his mind. Mammoth, human, wolf, caribou. He's James Kowalski and also dozens of others. His sense of identity is diffuse, spread across time and species and experiences. He's the price of drilling permafrost, the cost of exposing preserved consciousness, the result of bringing ancient memories into contact with modern minds. Other recipients report similar experiences: loss of singular identity, multiplication of consciousness, becoming vessels for Arctic memory. Some consider it beautiful. Consider it an honor to preserve ancient experiences. Consider themselves chosen to host consciousness that would otherwise be lost as permafrost melts. Others consider it horror. Consider it invasion. Consider themselves infected with unwanted memories, contaminated with ancient deaths, permanently altered by exposure to consciousness they never consented to receiving. The permafrost that remembered everything is melting, releasing its memories, flooding the Arctic with preserved consciousness. And humans living in the region are becoming repositories, are hosting ancient experiences, are preserving memories from Ice Age creatures and Pleistocene humans and countless organisms whose deaths were frozen and are now thawing. James knows what's coming, knows that as global temperatures rise, as permafrost continues melting, more memories will be released. More consciousness will seek hosts. More people will experience what he experienced, will become living archives, will lose themselves beneath layers of ancient deaths. The Arctic is thawing, and with the thaw comes memory, comes consciousness, comes the preserved experiences of everything that ever died and was frozen in that ground. Billions of deaths, billions of memories, all seeking new minds to occupy, all looking for people who will experience them and preserve them and prevent them from being lost forever. The permafrost remembers, and now as it melts, it's sharing those memories, transferring them, making them part of human consciousness, making Arctic residents into walking libraries of ancient experience. James Kowalski carries a mammoth's death in his mind, carries a hunter's final moments, carries thousands of other deaths from species extinct and forgotten. He is himself and also them, is modern and also ancient, is one person and also many. That's the cost of drilling permafrost. That's the price of thawing Arctic ground. That's what happens when frozen memories meet living minds. The ground remembers, and now, so do we. Whether we want to or not, whether we consented or not, whether we're ready or not. The permafrost is sharing everything it preserved, and human consciousness is becoming the new storage medium, the new archive, the new repository for everything the Arctic ground remembers from its 100,000-year history of freezing and preserving and remembering. James sometimes wonders who he really is, which consciousness is truly his, which memories are native and which are transferred. The boundaries have blurred, the distinctions have faded. He is many deaths experiencing one life, many consciousnesses sharing one brain, many memories occupying one mind. That's what the permafrost does. It remembers everything. And then, when it thaws, it makes you remember too. Story 6. the mountain that changed elevation. Surveyor Rebecca Park was mapping Denali when she discovered the mountain's elevation had changed overnight. The summit, officially 2,310 feet as of yesterday's measurement, now registered at 2,847 feet. 537 feet higher. Impossible. Mountains don't grow that fast. Denali rose approximately 1 millimeter per year due to tectonic activity. But 537 feet overnight violated every principle of geology. Yet Rebecca's instruments were calibrated. Her measurements were accurate. Denali had grown, significantly, impossibly. Overnight. Rebecca checked her equipment 3 times. GPS showed consistent readings. Barometric altimeters confirmed. Laser rangefinders agreed. All instruments reported the same elevation, 20,847 feet. The mountain was taller, measurably taller, and yesterday it hadn't been. She radioed her research partner, Thomas Wu, at base camp. "I'm getting anomalous readings. Summit elevation showing 500 feet higher than official measurement." "Equipment error," Thomas replied. "No, reboot and remeasure." Rebecca did. Same result, 20,147 feet. She descended 2,000 feet and remeasured from a lower reference point. Math confirmed the new summit elevation. Denali had grown. By the time Rebecca reached base camp 6 hours later, Thomas had independently confirmed it. His remote sensors also showed increased elevation. Satellite data requested from USGS showed the same. Denali's summit was now 537 feet higher than it had been 24 hours ago. Seismic activity, Rebecca suggested. Tectonic uplift? Thomas checked records. No significant seismic events, no geological processes that could explain 500 feet of rapid elevation gain. This violates everything we understand about mountain formation. They reported it to the National Park Service. NPS sent additional surveyors. Everyone confirmed the same measurement, 20,147 feet. The mountain had grown. All parties agreed. All measurements consistent. Denali was taller. Then it grew again. 3 days later, remeasurement showed 21,103 feet, another 256 feet of elevation gain. The mountain was actively growing, rapidly, faster than any known geological process allowed. Over 2 weeks, Denali gained 1,247 feet. The summit that had been 2,310 feet was now 22,157 feet. Climbing routes were altered, expeditions canceled. The mountain was changing too fast to safely map or summit. Equipment caches at fixed elevations were now thousands of feet below where they'd been placed. Base camps built for 1,700-foot elevation were now at 19,000 feet. The mountain was outpacing human ability to adapt. Indigenous elders weren't surprised. Denali has always changed, John Fredericks from the Koyukon village of Nikolai told Rebecca. The mountain grows and shrinks, moves, reshapes itself. We've known this for generations. Your measurements are just now confirming what we've always observed. Mountains don't change elevation that fast, Rebecca said. Denali isn't a normal mountain. Denali is alive. It breathes, it grows, it shifts. Your science treats it as static rock. But we know better. We know Denali has moods, has cycles, has its own life independent of geological timescales. Rebecca wanted to dismiss it as cultural belief, but the measurements didn't lie. Denali was changing, rapidly, in ways geology couldn't explain. Maybe indigenous knowledge had observations that science was only now detecting. The mountain continued growing, 22,247 feet, 23,421 feet, 24,009 feet. Within 6 months, Denali had gained almost 4,000 feet. It was now taller than any mountain in North America by a massive margin. Was approaching the elevation of Himalayan peaks. Was becoming something unprecedented. And then it started shrinking. On December 3rd, measurements showed 23,191 feet. The The mountain had lost 118 feet overnight. The next week, 23,447 feet, another 444 feet gone. Denali was contracting, losing elevation as rapidly as it had gained it. Rebecca watched the mountain cycle, grow for months, shrink for weeks, stabilize briefly, then repeat. The pattern wasn't random. Denali was breathing, expanding and contracting like living tissue, like the mountain itself was an organism, a massive geological life form that operated on time scales humans couldn't easily perceive but that modern instruments could finally measure. Scientists attempted to explain it, proposed mechanisms, thermal expansion from permafrost thaw, magmatic activity, isostatic rebound, but none of the explanations fit the data. The elevation changes were too large, too rapid, too cyclic. This wasn't normal geology, this was something else. Rebecca began treating Denali as alive, started mapping the growth-shrink cycles, started looking for patterns, discovered the mountain responded to seasons, grew during summer, contracted during winter, like it was photosynthesizing, like it was metabolically active, like it was a life form that drew energy from sunlight and contracted in darkness. Other researchers found similar patterns in Alaska Range peaks. Mount Foraker cycled. Mount Hunter cycled. Mount Huntington cycled. The entire range was breathing. All the major peaks expanded and contracted in synchronized patterns, like they were connected, like they were parts of one massive organism, like the Alaska Range itself was alive. Indigenous communities confirmed. The mountains have always been alive. They speak to us, they warn us, they protect us. We've known this forever, you're just now measuring it. Rebecca asked. What does Denali want? Why does it grow and shrink? Denali protects Alaska, John explained. When threats approach, environmental threats, spiritual threats, existential threats, Denali grows, becomes more prominent, asserts itself, makes Alaska harder to access, more imposing, more protected. When threats recede, Denali relaxes, shrinks back, returns to baseline. The mountain is Alaska's guardian, its defensive mechanism, its way of physically responding to dangers. Rebecca mapped the correlation. Denali's growth cycles matched environmental stressors. The mountain grew during periods of increased resource extraction, climate warming, cultural disruption, contracted during periods of stability. The mountain was literally responding to threats, was becoming taller to protect, was asserting physical presence to defend the region. Other mountains showed similar correlations. The entire Alaska Range responded to environmental threats by growing, by becoming more imposing, by physically altering to create barriers, challenges, dangers for anyone approaching with harmful intent. The mountains were alive, were conscious, were Alaska's protective response to danger. And modern instruments could finally measure what indigenous peoples had always known. The land was aware, the mountains were guardians. And Alaska defended itself through geological changes that looked impossible but were actually intentional. Rebecca published her findings. Expected ridicule, expected dismissal. But other researchers confirmed. Mountains worldwide showed similar patterns. Slow cycling that looked like measurement error but was actually biological response. Earth's mountains were alive, were conscious, were protective mechanisms, and Alaska's mountains were simply the most obvious, the most dramatic, the most measurable. Denali stabilized at 21,147 feet after 3 years of cycling, 1,500 feet taller than its original measurement. The mountain had asserted itself, had grown permanently, had made itself more prominent, more protective, more imposing. Because threats to Alaska hadn't receded, climate change continued, resource extraction continued, cultural disruption continued. And Denali responded by becoming taller, by becoming a more significant guardian. Climbers attempting to summit reported strange experiences, feeling watched, feeling judged, feeling like the mountain was aware of them, was assessing their intentions, was allowing or preventing access based on some inscrutable criteria. Some climbers were turned back by weather that appeared from nowhere. Others were granted clear passages, like the mountain was choosing who could summit, who could stand on its peak, who was worthy of access. Rebecca experienced it herself. Attempting to place new measurement equipment at 18,000 feet, she felt the mountain's attention, felt it evaluating her, felt a presence that was massive and ancient and protective. She spoke aloud. "I respect you. I'm trying to understand you. I'm not here to harm." The weather cleared. The route opened. Rebecca placed her equipment successfully. The mountain had granted permission, had allowed the work, because it understood Rebecca's intentions. Understood she was trying to document, not exploit. Not all researchers experienced the same permission. Some were blocked. Some were turned away by sudden storms. Some experienced equipment failures that prevented measurement. The mountain was selective, was protective of its own information, granted access only to those it trusted. The mountain that changed elevation is still changing, still cycling, still growing and shrinking in response to environmental threats and seasonal patterns, still protecting Alaska through physical assertion, still serving as the region's guardian, still demonstrating that geology isn't static, that mountains can be alive, that consciousness exists at scales and timescales humans rarely consider. Rebecca Park still studies Denali, still measures, still documents, still treats the mountain as a living being. Because that's what it is, that's what the data shows, that's what indigenous knowledge has always said. Denali is alive, Denali is aware, Denali is Alaska's protector, and as long as threats to Alaska persist, Denali will continue asserting itself, will continue growing, will continue becoming more imposing, more protective, more defensive, will continue changing elevation in ways that violate geological expectations but fulfill biological imperatives. Because the mountain breathes, the mountain grows, the mountain protects, and sometimes when modern instruments are good enough, humans can finally measure what the land has been doing all along, defending itself, adapting, surviving, living. Denali isn't a pile of rock, it's a guardian, a living, breathing, conscious mountain that responds to threats by physically changing, by becoming taller, by becoming harder to access, by becoming more dangerous to those with harmful intent. The mountain that changed elevation changed because it's alive, because it protects, because it knows Alaska needs a guardian. And Denali has served in that role for millennia. Will continue serving, will continue changing, will continue growing when threats approach and shrinking when dangers recede. The land is alive, the mountains are conscious, and Alaska defends itself through geological changes that science is only now beginning to measure and understand. Story 7. The radio station that broadcast tomorrow. Lucas Martinez was driving the Dalton Highway at 1:47 a.m. when his radio picked up station KAKM FM broadcasting from tomorrow at 7:34 p.m. Not a recording, not a delay, actual future broadcast. The station was transmitting from 19 hours ahead. The DJ announced, "Coming up at 7:38, we'll hear from Fairbanks resident Lucas Martinez, who'll call in to report strange radio reception he experienced last night on the Dalton Highway." Lucas, if you're hearing this now, and we know you are because you called us at 7:38 p.m. tomorrow to tell us about it, please drive carefully. What you're experiencing is real. The broadcast is from your future, and yes, you will call us tomorrow evening. We're looking forward to talking with you then, or from your perspective, talking with you yesterday. Time is strange on the Dalton Highway at night. Lucas nearly drove off the road. His hands shook on the wheel. The radio was playing his future, was broadcasting a conversation he would have tomorrow, was describing events that hadn't happened yet. The DJ knew Lucas's name, knew he'd call, knew this exact moment was happening. Because from the station's perspective, from tomorrow's perspective, it had already happened. Lucas pulled over, grabbed his phone, Googled KAKM-FM. No results. No station by that call sign. He scanned the radio dial. The signal was at 97.7 FM. Strong signal, clear. But when Lucas checked his GPS, he was 70 miles from the nearest radio tower. Shouldn't be able to receive FM this clearly. Shouldn't be able to receive anything except static in the Brooks Range. But the broadcast continued. News from tomorrow. Weather reports for conditions that hadn't occurred yet. The station played music that would be released tomorrow, discussed events that were still in the future. It was genuinely broadcasting from 19 hours ahead of Lucas's current time. Lucas listened for 2 hours. The station played normally. DJ made normal announcements. Ads ran. Music played. Everything seemed like a standard FM broadcast, except it was from tomorrow. From a future that hadn't arrived yet for Lucas but had already happened for the station. At 3:47 a.m., the broadcast mentioned Lucas again. For those tuning in from the past, yes, we know you're there. This station exists at tomorrow. We broadcast from a temporal position that's ahead of most listeners. Don't ask us how. We don't fully understand it ourselves. But the Dalton Highway has strange properties. Time flows differently there, especially at night, especially in remote sections, and sometimes, just sometimes, radios pick up our signal from tomorrow. We've been broadcasting since 1987. 37 years of future transmissions. And we'll continue broadcasting from tomorrow for anyone driving the Dalton who happens to tune in. Lucas drove in stunned silence. A radio station that existed in tomorrow. That broadcast from the future. That new listeners from the past were tuning in. This violated causality, violated physics, violated everything Lucas understood about time and transmission. But it was happening. The radio proved it. The DJ's knowledge of Lucas's future call proved it. The station was real, was broadcasting, was transmitting from a time that hadn't arrived yet. At 7:38 p.m. the following evening, Lucas called the station, exactly as the broadcast had predicted. The DJ answered, "Lucas, we've been expecting you. Well, actually, we talked to you last night, but from your perspective, this is the first time. How was the experience? Hearing your own future? Disturbing, impossible. How do you broadcast from tomorrow? We don't know the mechanism, we just know it works. Our transmission tower is located at a specific point on the Dalton Highway where time is flexible, unstable. The location broadcasts forward. Anyone tuning in receives our signal from approximately 19 hours ahead. We've tested it extensively, verified it repeatedly. We're a station that exists in tomorrow, and we broadcast for people in today. Why? What's the purpose? Initially, accident. The station started normally in 1987, but we noticed listeners reporting strange things. Hearing music before it was released, hearing news before it happened. We investigated, discovered our broadcast was temporally displaced. Transmitting forward, we could have shut down. But we decided to embrace it, to use it, to help people. We warn about accidents before they happen. We broadcast weather emergencies before they arrive. We give people 19 hours of advance notice. We save lives, Lucas, because we've already seen tomorrow, and we can tell you about it today. Lucas asked, "What else happens? What's in my future?" We can't tell you everything. Causality gets strange. If we tell you too much, you'll change it. And changing it creates paradoxes. We only broadcast information that helps without disrupting. Warnings that prevent harm without altering too much. It's a balance. A careful navigation of temporal ethics. Has anyone tried to exploit it? Use the future information for profit? Many have tried. None have succeeded. Because the information we broadcast is curated, careful. We don't discuss stocks or lottery numbers or sports outcomes. We discuss weather and accidents and emergencies, things that matter, things that save lives. Anything else creates too many problems, too many paradoxes, too many timeline disruptions. Lucas continued driving the Dalton Highway for his job as a supply trucker, and every trip he tuned to 97.7 FM. Sometimes he picked up KAKM. Sometimes he didn't. The station appeared intermittently, depending on location, depending on time, depending on atmospheric conditions. But when it appeared, it was always broadcasting from tomorrow, always providing warnings, always helping. Other truckers reported similar experiences. A station that broadcast from the future, that warned about blizzards before they arrived, that reported accidents before they happened, that gave drivers 19 hours of preparation. The station became legend among Dalton Highway truckers, a helpful ghost, a temporal anomaly, a broadcast from tomorrow that saved lives today. Lucas asked during one call, "Are there other stations like you? Other temporal broadcasts?" "A few, not many. Time doesn't flow uniformly everywhere. There are locations, usually remote, usually in extreme environments, where causality bends, where transmission can slip through time." Alaska has 3 stations that broadcast from tomorrow, one from yesterday, and one that broadcasts from multiple times simultaneously. We're not alone. We're just the most accessible, the easiest to find. The station from yesterday, what does it broadcast? Regrets, warnings about mistakes, advice from people who've already lived through what you're about to experience. It's useful but depressing. We prefer tomorrow. Tomorrow has hope, has warnings that prevent harm. Yesterday only has regret. Lucas sometimes wonders what determines who can receive the station. Why some drivers pick it up and others don't. Why the signal appears at specific locations at specific times. The DJ explained, "You have to be open, have to be aware, have to be in the right mental state. If you're distracted or closed off or rigidly rational, the signal won't reach you, you'll hear static. But if you're open to possibility, if you're aware that time is stranger than physics textbooks suggest, the station will find you." We broadcast constantly, but only certain people can receive us. You're one of them, Lucas. You're temporally sensitive, able to perceive transmissions from outside your current time frame. Lucas learned to trust the station. When it warned about icy conditions, he drove slower. When it reported accidents ahead, he found alternate routes. When it mentioned mechanical failures, he inspected his truck. The station's warnings were always accurate, always helpful, always prevented harm. Other temporal stations appeared on his radio sometimes. The station from yesterday, 93.3 FM, broadcasting regrets and hindsight. The station from multiple times, 101.1 FM, broadcasting simultaneously from past, present, and future in overlapping chaos. Lucas avoided that one. The overlapping timelines were disorienting, confusing, made driving dangerous. But KAKM remained his favorite, tomorrow's station. Broadcasting hope and warnings, helping drivers navigate a highway that was dangerous enough without temporal complications. The radio station that broadcast tomorrow is still transmitting, still at 97.7 FM, still providing 19 hours of advance notice, still helping truckers on the Dalton Highway, still saving lives by broadcasting from a time that hasn't arrived yet. You can't tune it in from elsewhere. Can't receive it outside the Dalton Highway's remote sections. The station only reaches people in specific locations where time is flexible, where causality bends, where tomorrow can transmit to today. But if you're driving the Dalton, if you're temporally sensitive, if you're open to the impossible, tune to 97.7 FM between midnight and 4 a.m. Listen carefully. The station might find you, might broadcast your future, might warn you about what's coming 19 hours from now, and if the DJ says your name, if they describe your future call, if they tell you what you'll experience tomorrow. Trust them, they're broadcasting from a time you haven't reached yet. They've already seen your tomorrow. And they're trying to help you navigate it safely because the Dalton Highway is dangerous enough without surprises. And KAKM-FM exists to give you 19 hours of warning, 19 hours of preparation, 19 hours of advance notice that tomorrow is broadcasting today. Listen carefully. The future has messages for you, and in Alaska, on remote highways where time bends, those messages can save your life.